.0821, .083, .084, and .089. Should board final action, vote, or decision on any matter considered in the closed session be required, such final action, vote, or decision shall be taken at the open meeting covered by this notice upon the reconvening of this public meeting or at a subsequent public meeting of the board upon notice thereof. We have been joined by Trustee Santos. The board has now adjourned to closed session at 5:08 p.m. This meeting is now reconvened in open session. The time is 6:40 p.m. We will now consider voting items from the agenda review, business agenda. Trustees, each month, administration will bring forth revised policies with changes recommended by the Texas Association of School Boards, TASB. These policies will start off as action items at the agenda review meeting for the first reading. Similar to the regular monthly board meeting, each month, all action items for agenda review, including these policies, will begin on the consent agenda. If a trustee would like an item held from consent, they should notify the district chief of staff, Sylvia Tran, by 8 a.m. on the Monday prior to the voting meeting. As a reminder, trustees had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions before agenda review to the administration. The Q&A document has been provided to you prior to this meeting and is also posted on the district's website. As no trustee requested to pull any items from today's consent agenda, we are now ready to vote on approval of the agenda review business agenda items by consensus. May I have a motion? Is there a second? Second. We have a motion by Santos, Trustee Santos, and a second by Trustee Flynn Villasecca. Any discussion? Please vote.
Oh, sorry, I'm trying to get in the queue. I have a quick question. Oh, that's fine. I can do it after. Mine is like, oh.
The vote is 9-4, 0 against, 0 abstain. Review of the superintendent's agenda items to be presented to the Board of Education on Thursday, November the 11th, 2021. Our next order of business is to consider items to be presented at the regular board meeting of November the 11th, 2021. As a reminder, trustees, everyone had an opportunity prior to this meeting to submit questions to the administration. The Q&A document was sent to all trustees and has been posted on the district website. Trustees, starting with District 1, please state which items you would like pulled for discussion this evening. Trustee Santos?
None, thank you.
Trustee Bluford Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. K1B, package page 12. K1B, package page 20. 20. K6B is in boy, package page 44.
Is that it?
That's it, thank you.
Trustee Hernandez?
I would like D1, I1, project number 210410.
Packet number 20, packet page what?
Oh, I don't.
I'm sorry. What did you say after you said?
21 project number
21
0410.
0410. That's okay. You can go to the next one.
That's
We'll
all.
find it. That's it. Trustee Dygard?
D1, D3, and K1 from, for next Thursday.
Trustee Flynn Villasecca?
Items have been pulled.
Trustee Sung?
D1 and D3, thank you.
Trustee Cruz?
D1, D3, I1, I4, I5. And then
I4.
the K, that was my question. So the K items, like we're doing second reading next week, is that correct? Okay, so I can actually ask a question then. Okay, K5B. Thanks.
K 5B. Yes, dear.
Also, K3 for second reading.
K3. Trustee Guidry?
D1 and D3.
Keeping consistent with our norms at agenda review, we will do 2 rounds of 2 minutes per trustee for each item. If trustees would like to add additional time for comments and discussion, that can be done by the will of the board with a motion, second, and vote. We will start with item D1. D1 is the approval of fall 2021 class size waiver request. Trustee Hernandez.
I'm pulling. So in the board waiver report, I believe at the very bottom, on page 11, there's waivers for middle school and high school. Am I reading that correctly?
Dr. Cruz?
Can you confirm what document you're referencing?
So this is a board waiver report. It is a separate document that's not on the agenda.
Can I
It's
ask
on the
Dr.
portal.
Matney to address that? Can I ask Dr. Matney?
Yes, Dr. Madney.
Hi, good evening, trustees. Yes, Trustee Hernandez, on that report, that's by school office area, and some of our so in our middle school office, we have our K-8 schools, and in our high school office, we have some of our in-district charter schools, early childhood centers, so they are inclusive of some of those early grade levels.
Okay, that makes sense. That's my only question on this item. Thank you.
Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. So you've indicated that this is the first year that pre-kindergarten is included with class size waivers. So, like, this is almost doubled since last year. Are all of these extra class size waivers pre-K?
Dr. Matney?
No, actually, pre-K resulted in an increase, but if you removed pre-K out, we would still be over 541, which is what we had in 2021. So we still would have had an increase.
Okay, so specifically about pre-K, what is progress? I know we haven't finalized it, but progress measure or constraint progress measure 5.2 is about reducing pre-K class sizes, right? Like, and remind me what that language is?
So the 5.2 is looking at reducing the district average of adults to students or students to adults to the 11-to-1. So the impact would be that we're going to have to hire new either assistants to be in classrooms, open up new pre-K classrooms with teachers and an assistant to bring that ratio down.
So what I'm hearing is we have a whole bunch of pre-K classrooms that aren't going down to that lower student or lower adult to student ratio. We're actually having several pre-K classes that are going to be greater than 20 or greater than 22-to-1.
So there's a little subtle difference. This waiver is 22-to-1 for the teacher to student. Our constraint is teacher and assistants.
Okay. All right. That is an important clarification. Thank you. So what are other reasons for these class size waivers to go up? How many of them are facility related and how many of them are budgetary and how many of them are lack of being able to have enough teachers?
And we can very easily clarify that information, separate it out, and put it in as a board referral. I'm sure we're not going to have that information directly in front of us right now.
Okay. I just know there are other districts that have used their ESSER dollars to reduce class sizes, And this seems to be going way in the wrong direction with COVID learning loss, and I'm very, very uncomfortable with it.
We'll get that information out in the board referral.
Okay,
Yep.
thank you.
Is that it, just one? Trustee Song?
Thank you for providing the attachment with the additional information. Trustee Dygard, if you take out the pre-K, because I had the same question as you, if you take out the pre-K, the number of class size waivers excluding pre-K is 896. So 112 of those are pre-K. So my question around this is, well, first some context. So Superintendent House, from 2015 to 2016, if you look at the file provided, there was a significant drop in the number of class size waivers. And I think that was driven by board concerns that we have so many large elementary school classes. And this predates any of us being on the board. And one of the ways that the administration reduced the number of waivers was to pack additional students into one class. So for instance, if you have 3 third-grade classes in a school and you have 6 extra students, you have a choice. You can put 2, 2, 2, so you have 2 extra kids in each of the 3 classes, or you can put all 6 into one. And educationally, I would think the first choice would be better. You know, every class goes up a little bit by 2 kids. But to reduce the number of waivers, the second choice is better. And so my question on this item is always, what does this number of waivers reflect? Is it that we are packing kids into fewer classes, so you have a few kids getting a really big class? Or is this reflective of us making the best choices for kids, kind of educationally? And I always want to make sure that we're not sacrificing educational quality just to make it seem like we've got fewer large classes.
Sure. Dr. Matty, would you like to offer some additional context here?
Yes, and Trustee Sung, that's a really great point and exactly what happened this year. So principals chose to do that spreading out instead of packing one classroom, knowing the impact of learning loss, the social emotional needs of kids this year. So when we looked at these waivers, we saw that choice was being made for the betterment of kids at the sacrifice of an increased waiver report.
Okay, so we've got 896 waivers excluding pre-K this year, which is 50 more than we had 2 years ago, pre-COVID. But given the additional insight you just shared, that may mean that we actually have fewer kind of oversized grade levels, if you will, fewer extra kids floating around. Okay, thank you, appreciate it.
Trustee Cruz?
My question was answered.
Trustee Guidry?
My question was answered, thank you.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Matney, President Allen, Superintendent House. So with these waivers, it includes pre-K bilingual, pre-K with students with disabilities, with learning differences, English language learners. Does this also include, maybe this goes to Trustee Sung's point, so when there are pre-K 3 and 4 classes together?
That's
Dr. Manning,
correct.
yep.
Correct.
So a teacher's teaching both 3-year-olds and 4-year-olds in the same class, over 22 kids in one class?
In some instances, that is the case.
I will say that my teacher advisory committee is very, very concerned right now because in areas with high concentration of poverty, and I know pre-K serves that population, but there's absolutely no their ability to teach kids right now is not happening. So when you have 3 and 4-year-olds and bilingual it's just not happening. So I don't know how to remedy that, and that's, how can I lean into the administration for that to help solve some of those? They don't have TAs.
We'll take a close look at it or whatnot from an equity standpoint, as you've indicated, and if there are instances where administration feels like we need to make adjustments, we can very easily do so. But we'll take a close look at it.
Okay, is there I guess this is to my colleagues, could we put a board constraint with that puts either two TAs or doesn't allow the administrator, our school district to have, to go without TAs in the top 10 neighborhoods with the highest areas of concentration? So the top 10 schools that we have in HISD with the most concentrated areas of poverty, to either give them 2 TAs or not allow pre-K classes to be over 22 kids big? Is that a constraint that we could have?
Well, like I said, we'll take a close look at it. We appreciate you bringing the concern to the table. We'll definitely, your feedback is taken seriously.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Trustee Hernandez?
I have 2 more questions. So my first question is, do we know how many pre-K classrooms we have this school year?
Dr. Madney?
Not in front of me right now.
Okay, perfect. My next question or suggestion, what I would like to see on this report too, I know that we have like 100 like actual numbers for each school year. I would love to see the percentage for the school year, because we know that there's a different number of classrooms at each school year. I would love to see how that, how these numbers translate into percentages. Thank you.
When you say percentages,
So for like, in the report that was provided, there's pre-kindergarten, 112 classrooms have waivers.
got it.
What the
Okay.
percentage
I'm with you.
is of the,
I'm with you.
yeah. So because we see numbers, but because there's a varying number of classrooms every school year for each grade level, especially now, how that translates into percentages.
We'll add that to the board referral as
you.
well. Sylvia?
Thank you.
Yep.
Trustee Flynn Villaseka?
Thank you. So just to piggyback off to what Trustee Santos was saying too, could we get some confirmation as to whether or not in our Achieve 180 program, we do have additional TAs serving classrooms and our historically underserved parts and campuses that we have across the district?
Yeah, we'll make sure that the report that we send out in reference to the referral reflects 180, reflects percentages, and reflects everything that has been spoken to this evening.
Okay.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you. Our next item on the agenda.
Kathy was trying to get in.
Oh. Trustee Blueford Daniels?
Thank you. I jumped in late, so thank you for acknowledging. Because I just wanted to know, when we talked about the ESSER funds before, is this an opportunity we could use ESSER funds for the TAs for some of these classrooms, particularly in elementary?
Yeah, ESSER funds can definitely be utilized, but one thing I want to caution us of, and one thing I've cautioned staff of, is when we brought ideas to the table, we have to understand that these are one-time funds, and that we're going to have to figure out exactly where these funds are coming from. We also know that we brought or have earmarked nearly 700 million in our ESSER funds, and we're looking at some specific things. So staffing is just something I want to be careful of. We have done some of it, but we're looking at the possibility of intertwining in the future some of the other federal dollars outside of ESSER. But to answer your question, yes, it is an allowable expense.
Okay, and I appreciate that because I know it's going to be short-term, a one-time, and it's not going to be continued. I got that. But I'm thinking in terms of, we hope COVID was short-term and one-time only as well. And this being an opportunity for us to take advantage of the use of those funds, since we're getting them, to try and improve the outcomes of students from pre-K, kinder, first grade, before they get to that third grade reading. So that's what I keep I've asked it before about the use of ESSER funds for that, but that's why. I'm glad my colleagues had some detailed explanations or conversations
Yep.
about that, because I just want to see that we can use that short term, but still, not for a quick fix, but to motivate and encourage and have that opportunity for smaller classrooms, but have the TAs there to assist the teachers to be able to encourage the kids or improve the outcomes between pre-K, kinder. That's our whole objective, right? To start prepping them for third grade reading, math, et cetera.
Okay,
Thank
thanks for that
you.
feedback.
Trustee Santos?
I have a quick question. So how does this affect our funding? I think, and I'm sorry, Dr. Matney, if I misheard you, but we have an increase in pre-K students. Doesn't that mean increased funding for the school?
Dr. Maddy?
Glenn on my right here too to talk funding, so I may pass it right over here. But yes, more students is good for funding.
Okay, and so with that being said, I'm going to piggyback off of my colleague, Trustee Bluford Daniels here. So you wanted to talk about learning loss. There is no learning loss if nothing is happening, if there is no learning happening in pre-K. So I cannot stress enough, and I know I was not an elementary school teacher, but I've leaned into my colleagues here, and both of you women have taught me so much. But pre-K is, I mean, that's why HB3, that big segment of money was there because of universal pre-K, and we need to have that. So I am not comfortable at all with these class waivers for pre-K at all, but thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is D3, approval of the executive summaries of school improvement plans for the 2021-2022 school year. Trustee Dygard?
Come back to me, please. Sorry.
Trustee Sung?
Thank you. Do we have a common process across schools for parents and for SDMCs to be involved in the development of the school improvement plans?
We do. Dr. Maddy, would you like to share some insight in reference to the shared decision-making?
Yes, absolutely. So in addition to every school being required to have an SEMC, they're also required to approve the school improvement plan. And so it can look different. Some campuses work through some of the minutia separately, but some do it right there at the editing table all together with the SDMC. So it can look a little bit different, but the expectation is that, and the law requires that it goes through and gets approved by the SDMC prior to coming here for board consideration.
Okay, very good. And then one plan that I asked about in particular was Wisdom High School. And I appreciated the details around the specific goals and the strategies there. But one thing I note is that the school is jam-packed. It's very apparent if you visit the school. And now I understand why in the Q&A. There's over 2,000 students for a building that was built for 1,700. And so, yeah, and I know it's not the only school like that. So I see here that they're making it work, which I appreciate, but this really is a struggle in working with ESL students who ideally need some more personalized attention. And so I see a request has been made to consider allowing temporary buildings for the school and other schools with similar space issues. So my question is, will that request be granted?
So that's a facilities item, and we'll definitely provide additional insight in reference to where we are with our mobile units and who's been granted, and from a timeline standpoint, when those mobile units will be out, we can provide that insight. We'll
Okay.
give you an updated report.
Thank you. I'd
Yep.
like that added to the Q&A, please.
Okay.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, those are my questions so far. Thank you.
Trustee Cruz? Trustee Bluford Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. I just wanted to add to what Trustee Sung's inquiry, because of course I was curious about the SDMCs. And I say that because the public has to keep in mind, we came in, some of us came in as trustees in January of 2020. By March, we were out for COVID. So a lot of these that we're revisiting right now is new for us. And people think that we were working on these things during that duration, but our concentration was on having the students return to school, some of them classes, and then of course, virtual classes, and having the funding for new computers and et cetera. So keep that in mind. That timeline is such that we weren't here. The priority was COVID and children. So now we're looking at SDMCs, finding out who those people are that are on those SDMCs so that we as trustees, after coming back from our COVID hiatus too, can work with those SDMCs to collaborate so they'll understand what it is that we're arguing or are trying to address as trustees to the district, and we can work together as a collaboration. So that was kind of more of a statement that I wanted to be on record that I wanted the public to keep in mind. We weren't talking about this as detailed and poignant as we are right now.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Flynn Villaseca?
I just wanted to point out and make sure on the record that similar to what's going on at Wisdom and other schools across the district, Sharpstown is experiencing the same thing. They have had the highest enrollment this year that they've had in many years historically. And when they moved into the new site too, they had already outgrown it. So I think we just need to be aware of those needs. In a state-of-the-art facility, there's still too long, and what messaging that sends to the community as well.
Yeah. We'll make sure that the report coming facilities really points out all those, not only drop in enrollments, but the growth at different schools and kind of where we are in terms of the mobile classroom distribution as well. Yeah.
Trustee Dygard?
Most of my questions have been answered. Thank you. I just have one. I ask it every year. Why, just for a refresher for all of us, why we do this after the school year has started?
Dr. Madney?
There's no real set timeline. That's a great question that's been asked many times. So when you think about the data that you need to really write a great plan, a lot of our school site-based decision-making teams in the spring are already thinking about, obviously, what the next school year looks like in the fall. But a big component is looking at data. And so you know what pivots you need to do. Data is starting to come later and later in the summer, and to the point where we don't know accountability until August 15th. We don't get our STAR data until early July. And so it's a process of giving the site-based decision-making teams enough time to meet, have those conversations, get school started at the same time. We typically want the DIP to be approved before the SIPs in case any tweaks need to be made in the month in between. We can definitely examine if, pushing it up. This is typically about the time that all of our area school districts bring for approval, but it's a very great question.
So, and this has always been sort of my understanding that this is, I don't want to say a formality of check the box. We're not deciding if the plans are the right plans. That's the administration's lane. We're just making sure that you have a plan, the plan is tied to our goals, that there are certain, understanding the thought processes behind them, but not exactly the techniques, if you will, of how you're going to achieve these goals.
Correct.
It's really sort of a rhetorical question. Just want to make sure that that's out there because not everybody understands why we do it when we do it and what our role is in it. So thank you.
Our next item is item I-1.
Santos.
Trustee Santos?
Thank you, Dr. Allen. Superintendent House. So piggybacking off of my colleague, Trustee Dygard. So since we want to reach these goals and the money helps us reach the goals when we're doing this as a campus, do we have an update on where the ESSER dollar breakdown is per campus? I think Trustee Hernandez and myself, we requested that. So if we're aligning, wanting to meet the goals, is our money going to meet those goals?
If I'm not mistaken, Dr. Cruz?
I believe it was a
Sent
couple
that
weeks
out
ago, if I'm not
already.
mistaken, we sent that information. The one pager that had the
what I
breakdown
thought.
of all the different program types, it was a spreadsheet as well, I believe, that Glenn put together. But we can certainly resend that if that didn't get to you for any reason.
But yeah, if you could, like, we have it by school, broken down by district.
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
Next item on the agenda is item I-1. It's in the I-1, page 20 of 22. Trustee Hernandez?
Yes, thank you. I pulled this item because I know that we talked about this item, I believe, back in September. And we were told that if the items were not ordered by a certain date, then we would be not in compliance with the law. So I'm wondering, have the items been ordered? I understand that we're adding another vendor to it, but because of what was explained to us in the September board meeting, I believe, I'm wondering why we're adding another vendor now.
Well, I'll have Alexis Legata to share some insight around why that
Thank you.
is. Yep.
Thank you. Thank you, Superintendent House. We're adding another vendor to ensure that we get best value for the district. So as we've been, and we're still under the code of silence, but as we've been talking to the vendors that were originally approved, we wanted to ensure that the police department was able to receive quotes from all the vendors who responded to the bid to ensure that he's getting best value.
So there was some explanation to the board about a September deadline for ordering the items. Can you explain, I mean, we're in November now, so are we not in compliance, or how is that?
Legata? Yep.
So, no, we're not in compliance. Again, we're still in the code of silence, so I'm limited on what I can say to you, but we needed to add this vendor to ensure that he was getting best value.
He is,
Chief Lopez.
okay,
Lopez.
perfect, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Our next item on the agenda is I-1.
No, that was I-1.
A. Trustee Cruz? Follow-up from the Q&A.
Yes, thank you, President Allen. So my question was on page 4 of the Q&A document, and I said, please provide evidence of how these services help students reach the board goals. So any projects that have to do with instruction. And what I'm looking, when I say evidence, I think what I'm looking for is like data points. A lot of this is an explanation, like these are materials and services required to support STAR. That was one of the answers. What I'm looking for is evidence of data that shows that it actually helps students achieve the goals that we have set for them. If it's a new vendor, is there evidence of this in other school districts, right? If it's a curriculum or a software or something, how can you show us that this was vetted because it is based on evidence that it will actually help reach
Okay,
the
we'll
students reach our
go ahead and
goals?
resubmit this and see what data points can be pulled for these particular vendors and try to revamp it to put back in the next one.
Yeah, and I think moving forward, I mean, some of y'all that have been here a while, you know, I've asked this question a lot of times. I mean, I think evidence to me means data. Just want to make sure that that's clear. Thank you.
Sure.
Next item on the agenda is item I-4, approval of the November General Fund Budget Amendment. Trustee Cruz?
Thank you again. Okay, so looking at the budget amendment, so I see that we have an estimated beginning fund balance. So that's 996 million. Am I looking at that correctly?
That's the total fund balance.
Okay. And then I know in policy, and I always get a little bit confused on this, and I can't remember if it's the unassigned or the assigned fund balance of we have to have 3 months of operating. Is that
That's
this?
correct.
So that's unassigned, but that is actually K2, second reading. Remember, we brought this back in, I think it was May.
Yeah, it was well
And it
ago.
was, right. So that's actually not policy right now.
Okay,
Where I'm asking you to consider on second reading approving that, but it's the unassigned fund balance.
so the unassigned fund balance has to be 3 months of operating, and then anything, so I guess my question, maybe I should clarify my question. So our total fund balance, 996 million, is this typical? To me, it seems really high for our fund balance.
Great question.
Is
Yeah.
this typical of
Chief
school
Reed?
districts?
So this year, we had probably the highest carryover of encumbrances we've had. Y'all have seen that on the past several board items. That's $147 million just in carryover. So last year was 55. So that gives you kind of an example. If you notice on here, I've got a note that says, note 3 here says reflects liquidation of carryover encumbrances. So that's why you're seeing kind of that big drop at the end of the year of it, because those are just dollars brought over. We will pay for those goods, and then they're used. Right, but yeah, it's higher than normal because of those encumbrances.
Okay, thank you.
Our next item on the agenda is item I-5, approval of the comprehensive annual financial report for the fiscal year ending June 30th, 2021. Trustee Cruz?
Sorry, that was I-4?
We just finished our
I-5.
4. This one is I-5 now.
I-5. Oh, I thought I had told you.
Oh, yeah, she scratched it.
Yeah, scratch it. Thank you.
I thought that was K5 that you scratched. Okay. Our next item on the agenda is K1, approval of proposed revisions to board policy, BED local, board meetings, public participation, second reading. Trustee Dygard?
Thank you. So packet page 82, there's under procedures, the middle of the page, it says public comment shall occur near the beginning of the meeting. This is procedures, it's prior to our differentiation over speakers to agenda items and speakers for hearing of the community. Currently, we hear speakers to agenda items before we vote on those agenda items for obvious reasons. Currently, we hear hearing of the community at the end of the board meeting after, these are our business meetings after we conduct our business. I'm presuming that the reason we've always done that is so we conduct our business and then any staff that doesn't need to stay can go home, right? So is this moving all speakers to at or near, or to occur, moving all of them to occur near the beginning of the meeting? Or does it keep hearing of the community at the end? Because my interpretation is it's moving all speakers to near the beginning of the meeting, including hearing of the community.
If you would flip over one page, you'll see hearing of the community,
Yeah?
and that will hopefully clarify kind of the separation between the two.
But point out to me, please, because I didn't see it, and maybe I missed it, that it says hearing of the when during the meeting hearing of the community actually happens.
And I'll defer to board counsel for any additional insight here. Or Sylvia.
So, Trustee Dygard, that packet page 82
Yeah?
that you first referenced, that is only for speakers to agenda items that speak near the beginning of the meeting.
It doesn't differentiate that. Before we talk about, here's how we're handling speakers to agenda items, and here's how we handle hearing of the community. So it implies to me, because there's nothing that, at least that I'm seeing, that says any differently later in the policy, it implies that all speakers are at the beginning of, or near the beginning of the meeting. And so let's presume that's what this says. So a question for legal, is this statement, this public comment shall occur near the beginning of the meeting, is that something that's part of a statutory policy change at the state level? Or is this just a change in our own, how we're gonna conduct things?
So state law requires that if it is a speaker to an agenda item, that we, first of all, at every meeting where we deliberate regarding agenda item, we allow public comment, and that public comment occurs either prior or during our discussion. So that language is consistent with that. We at HISD voluntarily have a second opportunity for individuals to speak on non-agenda items, and wherever we put that in the meeting is up to the board's discretion. So if there is language, Trustee Dygard, that you would like to propose with respect to speakers to non-agenda items, now would be the time.
So I'm not necessarily proposing that, I'm trying to understand what this does, like how it, what the mechanism is currently. The meeting. If we as a board want them to happen later in the meeting, we would need to clarify this in policy. Would that be correct?
I don't know what the intent of TASB's recommended change is, because I'm not TASB, but like you reading that, that's the way I would interpret it.
And
Okay.
Does the second paragraph address that this section is for agenda item speakers?
What do you mean second paragraph? Right after that line?
Yes. Let's see.
I wouldn't think that it does, because that's talking about the time limit, not where it is, where it occurs in the meeting.
That all board and public comment shall be given.
A possible edit could be that
I'm not saying we need to edit it. I'm just asking questions now, so I'll hear from my colleague. So I think that's something for us to think about as a board. If this line, in the context of this whole policy, is saying that all speakers happen near the beginning of the meeting, if we keep it this way, then we move hearing of the community to near the beginning of the meeting. If we want to keep our current structure, then we would need to modify this language, would be my thought. So, but my time is up.
At regular board meetings.
Would you like to make a motion?
Not at this time.
Trustee Hernandez?
Thank you. So K1 allows for speakers to address the board by video conference or in person. I know that this is a first reading on this, but for this is a second reading on this?
yeah, second.
Okay. For the public, can we have a little bit more information about when the plan for this is to start, the platform, and just a little bit more information?
Sure, we can.
Yes, I'm sorry.
Go ahead, Ms. Trent.
Thank you, Mr. House. If this policy is adopted tonight, then it would be in place for the December board meeting to allow the teleconferencing for speakers, whether they are students or adults, that want to speak to the board. They would be able and have the option to do it virtually. That would go in place in December, starting next month.
Is it going to be the same platform as before, similar platform?
No, it will not be a call-in. The law requires that we are able to see the person and hear the person. Before, we were only doing call-in. People would call in the number, they would be on the queue. We would tell them, go ahead and please speak, share your comments. This time, they would be basically using a link, like trustees were doing when y'all were joining us remotely. That's how the public, students and adults would be able to do it teleconferencing style.
And this will be available for agenda review and for the regular board meetings?
This would be an option for speakers for all types of board meetings, yes.
Okay, that was all my questions. Thank you.
Thank you.
Trustee Bluefer Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. I think what I was hearing, even with the questions that Trustee Dygart was asking, is it possible to move all the speakers up to the front? And I would definitely be willing to consider that, rather than them sit through and wait through the various portions of the board, of the agenda. And the other thing is, I'm just for the record, the cost, I asked about the cost that we could possibly incur with having people phone in as opposed to being here in the public since the boardroom is open. And I never got any information as to what that's going to cost the district to be able to do those modifications to allow that.
So after doing the research on it with our communications team and board services, there was little to no cost at all to make it work.
Okay, good. And so the other part is what happens if, for instance, someone is calling in voice and not be able to see? Because I think I heard that they have to be able to be seen publicly. So if they don't have the ability to have a webcam or a computer with a camera on there, then what happens with those individuals?
We'll try to make it clear on the front end
Okay.
that what the expectation is and why that expectation is. It's not our expectation, it's the state statute. So we'll try to make sure that they're prepared ahead of time and know what those expectations are so they can be prepared.
And then could we have an excerpt saying that if we cannot visually see you, then you would not be allowed to participate? That you have to be visually seen?
We can definitely do that.
I think that'd be important for clarity.
Yep.
For anybody that's willing to do that.
Yep.
Thank you.
Trustee Song?
So I think to maintain the status quo, following up on Trustee Dygart's comments, I think we would need to divide this into two groups. Public comment regarding items on the agenda, which occurs near the beginning of the meeting, and then public comment regarding items not on the agenda, which would happen as we currently do it towards the end of the meeting. I'd actually recommend dividing it into three groups so that if a student comes to speak to us in the hearing of the community, they are also allowed to speak near the beginning of the meeting. So the two groups I'd like to hear at the beginning of the meeting are speakers to agenda items and students who have come to address us. Thank you.
We have to be specific on that as well.
Trustee Dygart?
This brings another thought to mind because, we have people who come to our meetings to speak in part of hearing of the community who don't know that we're not, and I'm not pushing for one way or the other. Please don't interpret it that way. It was just, I think, worthy of discussion because of how I interpreted it, which seems like I was interpreting it correctly, that if that isn't the spirit of how we want to conduct our meetings, that we should consider different language. But I think if we do continue with hearing of the community at the end, helping people who sign up for it understand that comes at the end of the meeting, right? So they come later at night and possibly even considering setting a specific time, right? So even if we haven't finished with our business, that we pause at that time, let's say 8 o'clock, do hearing of the community, and then resume our business. That way, the public isn't waiting until, sometime, we have meetings at 11 o'clock where they're speaking, right? So I think there might be a way, if we are specific in this language, to move hearing to the community to the end, to be respectful of the public and have a set time for them to plan around.
Trustee Cruz?
Thank you. And while we're on the topic of our board meetings, We set a constraint, and I don't know if this is the appropriate place, but it feels like it. We set a constraint on ourselves. It said the board will not conduct its duties without including students, families, teachers, and community members, inclusive of those that speak languages other than English, in a manner that inspires broad community ownership of board policy. And I submitted a board referral recently, and thank you for that information. So I would propose that we have language, if that is, we adopted this as a constraint. Obviously, it's a value that we hold of utmost importance, and so just wanted to put that out there for thoughts.
Trustee Dygard?
I have one more clarifying question for legal, just to make sure I understand that state statute only dictates when we have speakers to agenda items. They are not telling us we have to have hearing of the community or non-agenda item speakers near the beginning, correct? We can have them whenever we want?
Correct, and they're
Okay.
not telling you you even have to have those at all.
Okay, thank you.
And Trustee Dygard, to your suggestion about having hearing of the community at a specific time, if that was the desire of the board, I would suggest language no later than, so that if you happen to finish a meeting early, you wouldn't have to wait until a certain time for hearing of the community. It could be earlier.
Makes sense, thank you.
Trustee Santos?
I am going to need a little bit of clarification. Trustee Cruz's point, I'm sorry, we've had kind of a long week. So, Trustee Cruz, are you saying that we need interpreters here? Is that what I'm hearing?
Yes.
And Superintendent House, how much would that cost?
So we've actually taken a close look at it, and I'll have Sylvia Tran, Chief of Staff, to tell you a little bit about what we've done and what the plan is moving forward.
So we have taken a look at the cost, and I'll get the numbers in just a minute. A factor to consider with translators is because of the length. We would need at least 2 to 3 translators because they need to rotate every 15 minutes per their own job,
Guidelines,
sort
yeah.
of, yes. And so we need at least 3 translators. I think, and I'm going to pull it up, and I'm going to ask Ms. Jones if she remembers that number, because we're pulling it at the same time probably. It's in the, I want to say it's like maybe 15,000, 10,000 per meeting, and that's per every meeting. So agenda review, board meeting, around there. But I don't quote me on the 10 yet. I'm gonna find it really quickly.
And I just want to remind my colleagues that I know when Trustee Cruz sat and waited to speak after the parents that came here to speak Spanish, that spoke in Spanish, and she waited and then spoke in Spanish afterwards, and it's like, I felt that pain. Like, you wait, and you don't understand anything until the very end, and it's, I only spoke Spanish for the first 4 years of my life. I get it. But I will say that Lisa, with SB 2929, was it 2969? It's not this legislative session, but the one before that, that requires people that speak a language other than English to have double the time in public comment. And not that we've not abided by that, but we have not given it space to honor it,
And we did, just FYI, Trustee Santos, we did take a look at some outside contractors, but we have made the decision to move forward and post 2 positions. So we do have 2 positions posted as interpreters that would support us in this work.
Okay, the cost, $10,000-$15,000 for community engagement and for people to feel welcome and a part of us it's a cost worth having, so thank you.
Trustee Flynn Villaseca?
I also just wanted to chime in and advocate for our parents, families, guardians, students that need American Sign Language services at board meetings. I know that Dallas ISD does implement that at their board meetings as well. And I would like to see the district move in that direction, since we're televised, we're live broadcast. Many people that come to our meetings may also need those services as well.
Duly noted.
I have the numbers. So we'd actually need 2 to 4 translators per meeting due to the length of our meetings. The cost is $18.92 per 5-hour meeting. Additional cost would be $378 per hour, and then annual cost would be about $41,000.
Trustee Bluefer Daniels?
Thank you, Madam President. And I want to ask this question because, as some of you may know, we're talking in terms of translations. I have a large population of Haitians who speak Creole. And then we have, obviously, a large population of Mandarin. You know, even the ballots are in Mandarin. So when we're talking about the cost, then we're going to have to look in the future of not just one translation, but probably multiple translations because of the number of people that we have in our communities. So I want people to take that in consideration because it's going to continue to grow, and we have to be considerate of so many languages.
Absolutely. We definitely recognize that we're the most diverse city in the country, quite frankly, and we know that we'll continue to watch those numbers as they grow to ensure that we make the necessary adjustments as needed.
The next item on the agenda is K3. There is no K3. No. Yeah, that was Dygard's. So it goes for second reading. Okay. Okay. It's adjournment time? I'm scared to say it. I said it's adjournment time? Don't be scared. Who?
Judith pulled K5B.
We don't have a K5B.
It's from agenda review.
That's on that note. That's from the note.
Yes, first reading.
It's already been voted on. We voted for it.
Yes, but it'll be second reading next week.
Right.
Yeah. So my question is for second reading.
But it has to, yeah, so you have to do it afterwards. You have to. All right. With no further business to discuss. Yes, dear. There is no K3.
K3 second reading.
But you, pass her one of y'all's notes.
Let me pass you my note.
But next week we don't ask questions, everything will be on consent agenda, so I'm asking my question today.
You can do it either on the Q&A or your one-on-one, but
Why
it
can't I
moves
ask
to,
a
because we
question?
already voted and passed it. So
now it moves to next week's agenda.
so
it's
now
an
you
agenda
do
item for
it
next
on
week.
the Q&A or the one-on-one.
I move to reconsider K3.
Second.
We can't pull it off we need to talk to legal. Hold on.
So these are your internal procedures. So if you want to now start doing something different, you as a board can make that decision. You guys have, in the past couple of board meetings, whatever you have voted on consent, has stayed on consent for purposes of first reading. And if you had additional questions, you either did it in the Q&A or did it for purposes of the regular board meeting. If at this meeting, you didn't meet the deadline to take something from consent, you've asked permission of the board. You just simply said, hey, I didn't meet the deadline, but I still want to pull something for purposes of first reading in order to ask a question. So you guys as a board just have to decide, how do you want to do that? Do you want questions, if someone has a question about a policy that's up for first reading that is still on consent, do you want it to be phrased in the terms of permission to pull from consent? Or do you want to treat that as a question regarding second reading that's allowed to be asked at agenda review? You've just got to decide that internally as a board, that's not a matter of Robert's rules.
Okay, so, but you haven't you're able to ask that question all of next week because it's coming up for second reading.
It's fine, Madam President, thank you.
Thank you. With no further business to discuss, the board is now adjourned at 7:41 on November 4th, 2021. Our next meeting is our regular monthly meeting on Thursday, November the 11th, 2021.